Welcome, everybody who is just joining us to this insight into business and management. We welcome those people who are joining us live and anybody who's watching the recording in the future. I have to say, it's a very sunny, lovely evening outside, so I would absolutely understand that you are saving this to watch at a later date. We are really delighted to have two people who are our speakers and panelists, as it were, this evening. One who is right at the beginning of her university and professional career, and Stuart, who has had a huge amount of experience in the various different sectors that we're going to be discussing this evening. So, just to introduce myself, I am Robert Crumpton, Mr. Crumpton. I am the director of sixth form at Manchester High School for Girls. Welcome, and we are joined also by Mrs. Norton, who is the head of careers, and Ellie Horrigan, who is our development manager. And we are going to have hopefully a really informative, engaging session this evening. We're going to be talking first of all to Jemima, who is one of the class of 2024. So she only left Manchester High last summer, and then we're also going to be talking to Stuart Carthy, who has worked in the fields initially of accountancy, but then moved into management consultancy, both for a big firm and then independently. And we're going to get their perspectives on what they have experienced in these very vibrant fields of business and management. And then finally, Mrs. Norton will be going through some very informative slides, giving you some insight into the universities that offer business and management and subsequent access to career pathways. We have found at Manchester High that lots of students increasingly are choosing business management and economics with business, business and a language, all of these different variety of courses that universities offer. It's a real growth area, particularly for young women, and it's something that we are very keen to support, and we hope that those people watching will get very many insights into this growing and dynamic field. If you do have a question, then if you could please put it in the chat, please write it in the chat, and I will either get to it over the course of the session, or we will have time for a Q&A after Stuart and I have had a bit of a chat, because we are going to treat this a bit like a question and answer and potentially build on the answers that our fantastic guests are going to offer us. We are recording this, as I have mentioned, so do please make sure that you are on mute, and ideally that your cameras are off if you are simply watching. And we hope that you enjoyed this session. So, Jemima, it's fantastic to see you. So, obviously, you were at Manchester High up until very recently, and you are currently, perhaps you can tell us where you are currently studying and what you are studying.
Hello everyone. I'm Jemima Islam. I'm a first year undergraduate at Durham University, and I'm studying business and management. I'm studying the 4-year degree with a placement year, and I'm really enjoying it.
Fantastic. So let's go back maybe to the sort of start of sixth form, because we might be having some people watching this who might be at that point and thinking about what they might want to study. What made you decide when you sent off that UCAS form that you had thought about business and management as your future university course?
So for A levels, I decided to take economics, maths, and Latin. And we didn't get offered economics at GCSEs, but it was offered at A levels for us. And I just absolutely fell in love with economics. Economics and its effects I felt all across society. Every individual expects them as well. And Mrs. Chisnall and Mr. Randall, they're an absolute brilliant department at Manchester High who make the subject so engaging. And a lot of the case studies that we learn within economics were real life companies that are still running today. For example, we did a case study on candy kittens, and you may go to a supermarket and you still see candy kittens. So I love that real life aspect of it as well. And I just absolutely loved learning about how to make a successful business. And I also took part in Young Enterprise within economics, and we made vegan and cruelty-free candles. And I've actually carried on that venture. I'll actually be selling candles at Youth Market at the end of April during Easter. Uh,
Amazing.
it's definitely an experience that I continuously talk about and will carry forward with me with future job opportunities and interviews and things like that.
That's brilliant, Jemima. Oh, I'm so glad that you're continuing with that. I mean, I think it's a great, fantastically interesting combination, really, isn't it? I mean, the maths is very, very useful. I think it's worth noting, isn't it? And I'm sure Mrs. Norton will talk about this, that for lots of business and management degrees, you don't actually need maths A level, but it can be very helpful to have that sort of numerical background. And Latin, really interesting in terms of the analytical skills.
Yes, definitely. So with maths, you don't need it for a lot of business and management degrees, but I took it because I was still considering if I should take like pure economics. But with maths, I think it helped me think logically and methodically. For example, let's put it into a business perspective. If a demand for a product is going down, what can we do to resolve that issue? For example, do we need to look at competitors' prices or do we need to differentiate our products? So I feel like those methodical and logical thinking that can come with, finding a solution, I learned from maths. And with Latin, I absolutely loved Latin. Miss Wellsby, Miss Othen, love them. And I feel like with Latin, a lot of the systems that we inherit today, such as taxation, they're derived from, like Romans and things like that. So I thought that was really interesting. And it was really helped me with my analytical essay skills as well to convey my economic theories with my essays and my assessments.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is obviously actually remembering your personal statement with some of these comments, which it was a fantastic personal statement that you wrote for your UCAS application. What else did you do then to prepare for your application through UCAS? What kind of things did you do? Did you read? Did you go, beyond the syllabus to try and make sure that you kind of came across as a really strong candidate?
So I talked about my academics, my A level subjects, but then I also talked about my extracurricular. So I talked about Young Enterprise. I also took up a part-time job at the end of year 11. So I included that in my personal statement. What else did I include? I also did over the summer, I did a workshop at RBC, which is an investment banking firm. So I included that to show that I'm a well-rounded individual, which I feel like enriched my personal statement further.
Definitely, yeah, and it was as I say, a really strong personal statement. And then, so you decided to go for business management. Did all of your courses include that placement year?
I think it was just Leeds that didn't, but all the rest, I think Liverpool, Manchester, Durham all offered the placement year. And at Durham, you can also do the 4 year with a study abroad year in your
Oh,
third
wow. Oh, that might
year.
be exciting. So obviously you say you're at Durham now. You applied also to Leeds. What were your other three universities? And can you just tell us briefly maybe what the factors were in the decision to apply to those particular institutions?
So I applied for two courses at Manchester University, one at Durham, one at Liverpool, and one at Leeds. So they were all around international business, economics, finance, and management. But when I went to Durham, I felt that with the course, it was very varied. So it wasn't just straight economics. There were a lot of different avenues that the course went down, such as I learned about finance and accounting. I learned about strategy, so how to actually create a successful business. And I also learned about leadership and management skills. So I thought a lot of young people don't end up actually knowing what particular career path that they
Mm.
may want to go into. So my course provides that, insight into a lot of different aspects.
Brilliant. So obviously you got the grades to go to Durham. Fantastic, right? And then maybe now you can take us through. Well, what exactly has been the course structure over this first year of your studies at Durham?
Yes. So I've taken 6 modules. So I have to take 120 credits. There's no optional modules in the first year for this course at Durham, but there are for second year. So I did 3 modules in my first term and 3 modules in my second term. And assessment wise, we have something called summatives and formatives. Formatives are optional assessments, but they're very highly relevant, and we're encouraged to do them to help,
Right.
enrich our business and management, theories and skills and put the frameworks that we've learned into practice. So we have 3 formatives for the 3 modules and then 3 summatives, which you have about a month to do, and that's usually an essay. And then that's the same for second term. And then third term is assessment term. But my course doesn't have any in-person exams necessarily, but I have a personal development program for 2 weeks within Durham University where they'll help me with internship opportunities, help me about employability, and things that I can do over the summer to help me enrich my business business learning.
Excellent, fantastic. So some of these modules, can you, I mean, you don't have to take us through all six of them, right? But can you give us sort of some highlights and what the kind of learning experience has been like? So obviously you talked about the assessment, but what's it actually, again, is it very seminar based, lecture based, group project work? So maybe you could like pick a couple of the modules and take us through exactly, what it looks like to learn them.
So I have lectures, I have seminars, and I have workshops. So lectures are with the whole cohort of business and management students. So that's more where the lecturer is presenting information to you and you're consolidating your learning that you may have done before the lecture, where you've written your notes beforehand, or you may come to class prepared with notes and questions for the lecturer. Then workshops are sort of class sizes of about 30 people, and they're a lot more interactive, and seminars are even smaller of about 10 to 15 people. And usually with seminars you do have prep work to do beforehand, and they're usually more interactive sessions where you might have a group task. For example, with my strategy module, which I took this term, that was focusing on how to actually run a business. So we ran a simulation business online and we were selling bicycles. So I worked with a group of 6 people, and every week we had to decide how many bikes we're going to supply, which supplies we're going to choose, how much we're going to charge for our bikes. And then at the end, there was sort of a competition to see who won, and you're against a lot of other competitors as well. So that was really interesting. And I also did finance and accounting this term. So if you're looking into investment banking or finance, I thought that was really helpful. I learned about income statements, balance sheets, and that was an insight to just, rather than just learning about leadership and management, if you especially want to go into, a more particular route in business, in a finance department, I thought that workshop was really helpful.
Oh, I mean, brilliant. What a fantastic overview. Are there any aspects of the course, being completely honest, that you found more of a challenge or less interesting? I mean, we want kind of full disclosure here, right? If people are going to choose to go down the business and management route, are there things that they should be wary of that, maybe that if they're not too into certain aspects of academic life, that they should maybe be wary of?
Yes. I would say for me, I'd probably say this term, my most challenging module would be my finance and accounting, because it was a lot of maths, income statements, taxation, all of that, but I actually really loved the challenge.
Mm.
And the assessments were maths based as well. So I'd say, if maybe maths is your, weaker subject, or, it is a weakness of yours, that could be something to consider. But the support at hand that Durham specifically has, I can't speak on behalf of all universities, but Durham offers so much support. So if you are, struggling, it's really easy to contact the department or your seminar leader or your workshop leader. But other than that, I've actually really enjoyed all my modules. And I'd say with the assessments, with my assessments on my course, they are essay based. So maybe if, you're not particularly, like writing essays and things like that, that might be something to consider. But I'd say definitely have a look at, the course modules that your university offers and how they assess you as well.
Oh, that's really fantastic advice, and I'm sure Mrs. Norton will echo that later. Can you then maybe sort of tell us a bit about life at Durham? So outside of the seminar room or the lecture hall, what have you been doing on an extracurricular level? What's, again, for people maybe considering Durham, which is a top 5 university, what's life like there more generally?
Durham is absolutely lovely. I feel like I'm going to say it's like a fairy tale there. It's a very small city, but they have so much to offer, and there's a lot of surrounding cities that are really close by, such as Newcastle, Leeds, Manchester. They're only you just get on the train. But I think what it is with Durham is that I really enjoyed is that I have my college friends, because Durham works as a collegiate system. So when I come back from a lecture, I have my college friends that I hang out with and that I might do formals with or my societies with, but then I also have my business course friends. So you'll find that you have different groups of friends, which is nice. And societies wise, I've done art society because I'm quite creative myself, so I wanted to carry that on outside of my business and management, which I've been really enjoying. College life has a lot of things to offer, such as formals. gown dinners, events like that. So I've been really enjoying it and making sure that I have, time to spend with my friends as well, whether that's, going out or going for a to a coffee shop to study, and also, meeting family as well. Coming back home is nice as well.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Well, maybe just for the benefit of people in the sixth form or even younger, about how often over the last two terms have you been going home?
So we have a 10-week term at Durham. There's no half-term holiday. So you end up getting longer Easter break or a winter break or a summer break. But I tend to come home, let's say I have a seminar in the morning on a Friday at 11 o'clock till 1 o'clock. I might come home for the weekend.
Mm.
So I'd probably say 2 to 3 times in the term. Personally, I came back home. I'm quite a home bird. And it was feasible for me to go home as well because I only live in Manchester, so it wasn't too bad on the train. But I think FaceTime definitely does help as well, and keep that contact with your family and friends back home.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I think you're right. The logistical, proximity is really important as a thing to consider when you're looking at different universities. Actually, you're going to have to leave us in about 5 minutes or so because you are doing some work at the moment. Maybe you can tell us about that, how you got into it, because again, lots of people, will be looking for part-time work opportunities at university, particularly for business and management. And it might be something that might lead them down a particular career path. So tell us what you're going to be going to do in about 10 minutes.
So I'm currently on this Zoom meeting, but I'll be hopping onto another Zoom meeting. I currently work for Youth Futures Foundations, and they are a What Works organization for young people. So we basically advocate and help and change systemic changes and help implement them into national policies to help young people into employment. So whether that's interviewing employers or encouraging them to join our trial programs to translate the evidence, and then somehow we make that evidence into something that looks nice, whether that's a zine or a presentation, so it can be given to the wider society, and hopefully they can implement those changes into their policies to help their recruitment policies to be more inclusive to young people, to help them, into employability, or it can even be into career services for higher educational purposes. And that this job has allowed me to speak to members of parliament. I've also been to parliament as well on behalf
Wow.
of them a few years ago, which has been amazing. And I'm a Future Voices ambassador for them. That's my role. But I'm working with a team of 15 people there, and they're an absolutely amazing organization. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. And I did end up getting a part-time job as well at the end of year 11. I thought that was really beneficial for me to sort of get into the world of work, to get stuck in there, to do something outside of school. But I've also learned, communication skills from that, because you're talking to the general public rather than people who are in your, close proximity, such as your peers. It's taught me how to do stock management, shop floor maintenance and things like that. So that's my first job, is something that I'll always carry with me as well.
Oh, that's brilliant, Jemima. Honestly, congratulations. You're doing so fantastically well. So how did you get that job as the Future Voices leader? How did you get it?
So I ended up, because I already knew about the organization through some charity work that I do. I saw that the job offer came up. I applied through a normal application, and then the interview was actually a little bit different. I was with a group of 5 other candidates and then 2 assessors, and it was more of an interactive interview, where we had a few questions that we'd have to answer as a team. And then after that interview happened, we got um, a congratulations offer if you ended up getting the job. And then I had a one-to-one meeting with the organization themselves. And yeah, and then thankfully I got the job.
Oh,
Um,
that's brilliant.
so yeah, it was a really nice recruitment process that they had. It was very comforting, and yeah, I absolutely love it now.
Great. And looking forward to the future, have you considered what you might do in your placement year? What kind of options do Durham provide for you? And then also, as well, maybe tell us what you think your longer term plans are. I think what Stuart's going to talk about is the fact that, at this early stage, your plans might very much change, but what ideas do you have?
So when I did that workshop at RBC in investment banking, I was like, I want to do investment banking.
Hmm.
And then I got to Durham and I had that, I had the management and the leadership qualities. So then I was thinking, maybe I actually do want to run my own business. I'm quite creative. I've, doing my candle business as a little side hustle. So maybe having my own business in the future, as a career prospect is quite interesting to me. And I also come from a family of entrepreneurism as well. So I feel like I've grown in an environment of that. But as of the moment, as a placement year, Durham University help you find your placement. But also, if you end up finding a company that maybe you don't like or isn't a best fit for you, you can also go and find a company yourself, and then Durham can sort the feasibility of that for you. And if you don't end up wanting to do a placement year, you can change to the study abroad course, which is quite nice because you might have a change of heart. So yeah, that's me.
That's great. And I think that's really important to recognize that, again, lots of universities will allow you to kind of be flexible and to shape your own course. Now, as you say, often in the first year, you've got a certain set of compulsory modules you've got to get through, but then after that, you'll be able to choose some different things. So any thoughts about what modules you'll pick next year?
I think I might do some more, even though it challenged me, maybe some more finance and accounting ones.
Wow.
Maybe. No, I really do like a challenge. So I think that might be something to consider for me.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Jemima, it's been a total pleasure seeing you again, and we are all very proud of you, and particularly proud of how wonderfully articulate and engaging you've been during this conversation. So, thank you so much. Obviously, we do understand you have to leave us in a few minutes. I hope this has been okay, and I wish you all the best for the next few months with these final assessments that you've got to get done.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, honestly, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jemima. Bye bye. Oh, wow. Well, that does make us proud when we have former students who can speak with such eloquence and enthusiasm about what they are doing at university and thinking about the future. Sorry, we didn't have time for any questions for Jemima, but if you would like to email Ellie or myself after this event, we can potentially pass them on to Jemima if you would like to ask anything more about Durham, about business management, about things that she did to ensure that she got some fantastic offers from some really strong universities for those particular courses. So we are now going to move on to have a chat with Stuart Carthy. Again, we're really grateful to him for being with us this evening. Hi, Stuart. How are you doing?
Hello. Very well, thank you.
Isn't Jemima fantastic?
Well, what a great advert for the school.
Well, yes, yeah, absolutely, and for Durham University. I mean, seriously,
Indeed.
I mean, I think they should, she should be a university ambassador in some ways. Thank you so much, Stuart. Obviously, you're not an alumna of Manchester High School for Girls,
My daughter
but
is.
well, there you go.
There you go.
And we really appreciate the fact that you are a wider member of the community, and it's really fantastic for you to be here with us. Stuart, as it says there, you are a retired consultant. You were a partner at Accenture, which is hugely impressive, and then you did go on to found your own consultancy firm. But can we just go a bit further back? Could you maybe just take us through, what your A-level choices were and your university experience, and how that helped to make the decisions to move into consultancy?
Okay. I was a bit of an all-rounder at school. Went to a very large school, but was quite academic. I liked exams. I had a bit of a bent towards maths and sciences, so eventually decided to study maths. I went to Warwick University, which I discovered, having not had perhaps the amount of careers advice and university advice that your students are enjoying, that it was intensely academic. Warwick is one of the preeminent maths research universities in the world, and it was a bit of a challenge. Having thought I was good at maths, I discovered actually I was quite good at sums, but not necessarily good at maths. And so I had to knuckle down in the first year in what was pretty difficult theoretical mathematics, but did pretty well. We didn't have a lot of options in the first year, so like a lot of degree courses today, much of the first year was sort of foundation modules that would give you greater options in further years. And the best thing for me was that in years 2 and 3, I could almost study any module in any other course in the university, so long as I could get to the lectures. And I didn't really look into this when I chose my university, but I would urge people to understand the structure of the degree courses and the degree of flexibility that
Yeah.
you have. Jemima's talked about her degree at Durham, where clearly there is a great deal of optionality. And so it was probably the case in my day that most people went on to university and studied the subject they were best at school. And so the more vocational courses like business management, management science, as it was called at the time, weren't necessarily as popular. I think of my peer group at school, we tended to go on to university into a more pure academic subject that was the one that we already knew something about. And so there's a greater deal of option these days. And particularly, university education was free for my parents. They didn't have to pay for me to go to university. If you're about to make a decision to spend £50,000 or thereabouts, then there is a great deal of merit in either being absolutely convinced that a highly academic course that you really want to study in depth is right for you, or alternatively, a more vocational course like business management gives you that firmer foundation for a whole variety of careers.
Sure.
So in my second and third years, I probably did up to half of my subjects, my modules were in businessy and accountancy type options. I did the bare minimum of maths, not because I hated it. I still found it a challenge. I still wanted to leave university with a maths degree. But I was able to study finance and accounting, business studies, operational research. I even did mathematical economics without even a GCSE in economics. And so, and some of this is with the benefit of hindsight. I wouldn't claim that I was clever in coming up with that variety of options. They were just things that I stumbled into in a way. One of the things that was always a backbone for me was, as some of you will know, I took part in a young enterprise at school, and my degree was sponsored by an accountancy firm called Arthur Andersen. So back in my day, there was an optional exam that was part of the young enterprise program, and I got the best result in the north of England or something. And Arthur Andersen offered a prize for that, and they were at the time, one of the big 4 or 5 accountancy firms, along with PwC, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, KPMG, all their predecessors. And so I had summer work for Arthur Andersen at the end of my first year, including some time in the States, and then at the end of the second year. And they offered me a job at the end of my second year at university. So I went into my third year with a job lined up.
Wow.
And although they encouraged me to go and talk to other firms, they knew it was pretty likely that I was going to accept a job with them because I'd already worked for them over 2 summers, met the people, got to know the organization a little bit, etc. So I suppose I kind of blundered my way into accounting. It wasn't something I knew much about when I left school, but it part fate and part sort of management on my own part, that's where I ended up. So once I graduated with a degree in maths from Warwick, I started as a trainee chartered accountant at Arthur Andersen in Manchester.
Wow, I mean that's a really, gosh, there's so much to unpick there. Actually, I think in some ways now, often people might be looking towards the degree apprenticeships that are available, to where again you can sort of like learn on the job, and there are quite a lot of those in those fields of accountancy and finance, and that's certainly something that we do encourage students increasingly to investigate. It's worth also noting that you did do the pure academic subject, but you could then use the skills that you developed through that academic subject, and obviously the flexible modules that you taken and applied those skills to a job in a more vocational setting after that.
That's why Jemima's insight is so important to the people on this call, because I think you have to understand how you're going to navigate your degree and what choices you have, because it may be you go in thinking you're an absolute brilliant mathematician. I got 90 odd percent in most of my maths exams, but I realized that the academic, the very theoretical maths wasn't really much for me.
Sure.
But I was lucky in that I was able to navigate my degree in a very different way, and it worked.
Yeah, and it worked obviously very, very successfully. So when you started with Arthur Andersen, I think quite quickly they transferred you from the sort of accountancy side of things into the consultancy side of things, into Accenture, which is their consultancy arm. Is that right?
Well, they didn't transfer me. Accounting at Arthur Andersen in the summer was quite slow because we were an American firm, and so many of the year ends for auditing were December the 31st. So the auditors, the accountants, weren't that busy generally over the summer, And a very enterprising partner, who was a consulting partner, took 5 of us to work at what was called National Gyrobank in Bootle, which was a bank owned by the government, owned by the post office, in fact, because they wanted some financially literate people to help test the systems. And so I got chucked onto this project for several months, actually, and most audits were taking 3 or 4 weeks, so it was quite unusual to be put onto a client job for many months, and actually enjoyed the people and the work much more. And so at the end of that, I said I'd like to transfer into what was a very embryonic consulting division of Arthur Andersen at the time that became Accenture 15 years later.
Right.
So again, that was fate, and it was just making the most of opportunities.
Now, I do think at this point it's maybe worth us being getting down to brass tacks, in the sense that a lot of people will hear the term management consultancy and they will look slightly bemused. They'll nod and go, "Oh, that sounds impressive," but they won't really know exactly what that job comprises and involves. So could you kind of give us some foundational knowledge about what being a management consultancy means in terms of the professional reality?
Well, let me answer that in 2 ways. Firstly, there are hundreds of firms of management consultants, ranging from the very strategic, the likes of McKinsey, Booz Allen, Boston Consulting, where you find yourself in the boardroom advising major organizations on their strategy. Now, obviously, if you enter that organization at the junior level, you're doing lots of research, analysis, and spreadsheets. You're not necessarily talking to the chief executive.
Sure.
And then there are loads and loads of small firms which may only have 10, 20, 30 employees. And then in the middle of that, there are firms like Accenture, who are 350, I think, 1,000 employees in the world these days. So it's a massive organization. And when I was in it, I was one of 2,000 partners across the world.
Wow.
And the sorts of work I did, I worked mainly with banks. So the banking industry was my chosen, well, actually not chosen. I got seconded onto that consulting project in Liverpool for the National Gyrobank, and by accident became someone who worked in banking. So Eleni was fate. My first project was a bank, and you get stuck into the financial services division, and I became a banking expert. I was the lead for UK and Ireland for banking for Accenture.
Wow.
But the sorts of projects I worked on, I helped Barclays develop telephone banking in the 90s. I also helped Barclays build their internet banking service in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. I advised NatWest when they received a hostile bid from Bank of Scotland to take them over in 1999. That was my first job as a partner, in fact. So my job evolved from large change projects where I might be one of 100 people, including client staff, working on a project, to much more specialist consulting and advisory work, where I was perhaps only in a team of 5 or 6, and even as a subject matter expert, asked by clients to do work in very small teams. And that was a result of managing my career in that direction over time. Again, some of it fate. Some things landed at my feet that were really interesting. Some things you spend time influencing the senior people in a firm that you want to work for, or have the interesting jobs that you want to do. So that's the nature of the consulting industry. The consulting job for an individual can be absolutely riveting and exciting. You can work on some projects that are almost famous. The last thing I did as a paid job was help to redesign Northern Rock after it collapsed in 2007.
Wow.
There's a claim to fame. But one of the things, if you're looking at that sort of career, and this is true in general management as well, not just as a consultant, the work-life balance can be quite hard to manage. I lived in Manchester, but I spent a year working on a project in Aylesbury. I worked in Scandinavia. I was quite lucky compared to some in that probably 60% of my career, I actually worked on projects that were commutable from home, but they were all on the client site, wherever the client was. And for 5 years, that was in London, because banking obviously is very London centric, but I was living in London at the time, 5 years. And so you have to understand that it can be quite demanding in terms of being away from home. yes, there is more working from home generally today as a natural development of the work environment, but it can have significant impacts on your social and family life. So you do need to understand the commitments that you need to make.
Mm.
But it's the same if you go, my wife, for example, was a store manager with Tesco, and she could have a meeting on a Friday and be told she was moving 100 miles next week because
Wow, yeah.
they move their staff around considerably.
Yeah.
And so if you're with an organization that has 200 or 300 outlets across the country, whether it's a bank or a retailer or whatever, and you're in the management hierarchy, then you have to be flexible. They do
Yeah.
demand that you move around as your career progresses, and that's a commitment that you have to understand. I think the world is more open to understanding work-life balance these days than it perhaps was when I was building my career. But you need to understand the dynamics of an organization that you're joining in a sort of management capacity.
Sure. I mean, would you say that most management consultancy work in the UK is focused on London? Would it be most
Oh, no.
advantageous to no?
Depends on the industry. Most of the larger, medium to large consulting firms organize on an industry basis. So whether that's government, financial services, manufacturing, whatever those industry verticals might be. And while many companies may well be head officed in London, their substantial operations may well be in other parts of the country. So, insurance, for example, is big in Scotland and Bristol. There's lots of financial services in Manchester and Leeds. Building societies are generally quite regional in their nature as opposed to being focused around London. If you're in investment banking, you're going to spend a lot of time in London. There isn't a great deal of that industry outside London. Manufacturing, you've probably got to be prepared to travel across Europe.
Sure, sure. Well, I think that's really important for people to know because often we do have students and wider people who engage with these events who might not necessarily want to spend all their time in London. I think it's important that some of these that we actually demystify that a little bit.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's very project based.
Yes.
Can you kind of like take us through possibly a day in the life really for say you're working on a particular project? What's an actual typical day going to look like for somebody who's working on a consultancy project?
Well, let's say you're working on a project where you're trying to introduce a new product or service for an organization. So take the example of me working on a team of about 150, helping to design and implement internet banking for Barclays at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. We would be working on a multidisciplinary team, perhaps 50-50 split between the consulting organization and the client, so very much a joint team. That project would be over a year in length, but you as an individual might only be on that project for a certain section of it.
Right.
The project would start off by wanting to understand what is the basic requirement for this new service? How is it going to work? How is it going to integrate with the services they offer over the phone or in the branches? What customers are they trying to attract? And then inevitably, there is a lot of systems development to do in order to get that service up and running. How are you going to launch it? Because how are you going to get one customer using it, then 100, then 1,000, then, with Barclays, 4 million. And so there's massive range of different roles on that project, ranging from the customer communication aspects, the deep technology required, the security aspects of it, etc. So a highly multidisciplinary team, a very dynamic environment, and in that particular environment, hugely competitive because all the banks were racing to be in the market to be able to offer internet banking. It was a competitive necessity.
Sure.
In the same way telephone banking was in the 90s. First Direct launched it and were taking customers, the best customers from all the other traditional banks. And so they were in a race to launch a service that would make them competitive. So a very dynamic, challenging environment to work in, but very rewarding when you launch the service, customers start using it.
Yes, gosh, absolutely. Yeah, and then you have that end point, don't you, which project work can give you. You know, you've actually got that. You know, it is, as you say, very dynamic, and there is that satisfactory outcome. You know,
Yeah,
the
I
product
built
is
that.
launched. Yeah, I've done that
Yeah,
exactly, which I think is, you know, as you say, you know, incredibly rewarding.
yeah.
So then subsequently you did, you know, move on from Accenture to found your own company. Can you just take us through, you know, the decision behind that and how challenging that process was and what it was like to transition from such a big firm to a smaller one that was ultimately though under your control?
I had no desire to run my own company. That was never part of my life plan, if you like. I'd been 17 years with Accenture. I was a partner, so I owned a 2,000th of it, technically. We went through what's called an IPO. So we effectively floated the partnership on the American Stock Exchange, and we became a corporation as opposed
Right.
to a partnership. And the organization changed quite significantly, where moving from literally one day owning it
Mm,
to the day being a senior employee in it, and it went in a very different direction. It went very much into more outsourcing as well as consulting. And, you know, frankly, I had a pot of shares, and therefore I had more life choices that I was able to make, given that it was no longer I was no longer a partner. I decided to just do my own thing. I'd already moved within the organization onto much smaller advisory type projects rather than these big internet banking development type projects, for example. And so I realized that I could actually make a nice living working for some of the clients that I used to have as an Accenture partner. So I could, so a lot of my work was basically for people I worked with as clients over the years. And it was, I could pick and choose my jobs. And so
right.
when I say I run a business, I was essentially I was a solo management consultant who employed 4 or 5 people to do other parts of projects with me. But it was basically a vehicle for me to do interesting work.
Great, and you know, but fantastic. Obviously, you put yourself in a position financially where you were able to do that, you know,
Yeah.
and sort of you know pick and choose things which interested you more. I mean, that's is there anything that stands out from that uh stage of your career that you feel you know was particularly rewarding or challenging?
One of the rewarding is I was able to do more mentoring and coaching of people. So some of the senior people I'd worked with in my time as in Accenture, I then was able to essentially charge them to be their coach or mentor, or be more of a trusted advisor, which is a very different capacity to working on a 300 or 400 person project. And so that was, and being able to pick and choose. So you know, my company was a limited company, but it was really a vehicle for me to do interesting work and to leverage some of the skills and the relationships that I built over 17 years in a large company.
Yeah.
And just a very different way of life. I mean, I still had projects that were that might have been 3 or 4 days a week away from home, depending on where the client was. By this time, I was back up in the northwest with a young family, and obviously my clients, being the banking was my industry,
Mm.
were in London. So still having to accept a fair number of nights a week away from home was part of what I was doing. But my dominant client in my Accenture career was Barclays, and many of the executives that I knew well went on to work in other organisations. So I worked for a county council because someone who was who was head of strategy at Barclays, went on to be in a county council. I worked for Visa. I worked for an IT company, Northern Rock. When Northern Rock went belly up, the guy that the government parachuted in to run it happened to be the former chairman of Barclays,
Right.
who I knew personally.
Right.
And so you leverage the relationships and the people that you've met over your career, essentially.
Sure, and that you know really highlights, doesn't it, how important that networking is and that ability to
Yeah.
forge those relationships. Yeah, I mean, I think that's key in all aspects of business and management. And then you did retire in 2012, and then sort of subsequent to that, I think you know done quite a lot of pro bono work, and you are really heavily involved in the Young Enterprise program, which is such a significant extracurricular opportunity for the sixth form at Manchester High. Can you tell us about some of those things that you've been
Well,
doing since retirement in
young,
inverted commas.
retirement in quotes. Young enterprise is very important to me, because without it, I would never have had the career that I had, because I won the Arthur Anderson Award as part of taking part in Young Enterprise. That led to my career. And although, I made it happen after that, without that introduction, it wouldn't have been as interesting and as successful as it was. So when when we were looking for schools for my son in 2007, he went to Stockport Grammar. There was a display stand in their open day showing off what their Young Enterprise team were doing. And so I talked to I eventually found who to contact and became a business volunteer at Aquinas in Stockport. And subsequently, I've spent about 5 years at Manhigh, being their business advisor at Young Enterprise. I now look after the volunteer force for the whole of Greater Manchester and chair the board of Young Enterprise in the Northwest. So it's my dominant sort of voluntary activity.
Sure.
In addition, I do sort of strategy and planning consulting work pro bono for free for Cheshire-based charities. I've worked for about 15 charities in the last 10, 12 years, something like that, which keeps me out of the house.
Well, we're hugely grateful for all the support that you do offer to our Young Enterprise teams. I mean, they really couldn't do it without you. So, thank you so much. I know Miss Chisnell would like me to pass on her thanks as well. Right, well, I would like to see now if we have any questions from the people who are joining us currently online. So if you do have any questions, if you could type them into the chat. So this could be anything to ask Stuart about any aspect of his education or career, or again to ask for a bit more detail about aspects of the role of a management consultant. So do please let us know if you've got any questions.
It might be worth saying that my son studied business management at Northumbria University and is in marketing management in Manchester.
Yeah.
And my daughter, who's an alumna, read economics at Loughborough and has just qualified as a chartered accountant at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I can cover those topics as well if they're relevant.
Fantastic. Right, absolutely. I mean, I think that's that's brilliant. Wow, they're really carrying on your legacy, aren't they? That's fantastic, Stuart. And again, it just shows what you get from being a Manchester High alumna. PwC after economics at Loughborough. That's a pretty great trajectory. So, does anybody have any questions? Again, I'm sure we can pass on any questions you might have for Stuart subsequently. And again, we are aware that some people will be watching this after the fact. And so, again, if you're watching this in a few months' time, when you're making some decisions, you're currently in junior sixth and you're watching this over the summer holidays and you'd really like to ask Stuart a question, then please feel free to contact development at mhsg.manchester.sch.uk. Well, Stuart, we might have some questions subsequently. It's been fantastic to hear such an insightful and thoughtful overview of a hugely impressive career. So thank you so much for joining us. If we don't have any questions right now, then I will pass over to Mrs. Norton, our head of careers, who is going to give you some advice as to how potentially you might choose to do business management at university and some of the subsequent professional pathways that are open to you, particularly maybe management consultancy. Thank you so much, Mrs. Norton. I'll hand over to you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. And it was lovely to hear from someone who's really just starting out on their journey at university, and somebody who's obviously had a fantastic career and is now doing things on a voluntary basis and kind of using all those skills and experiences to do things that you enjoy, which is brilliant. And I have to say, both of our speakers tonight made it seem really easy. You can just go to a fantastic university and do amazing things, and you can then go to university and do maths and amazing things there and have a fantastic career. And it's definitely absolutely possible, but it does take work, and it does take effort, and it does take research and thought, whether you're going at the university level, which I'm going to talk about, or the choices that Stuart's made throughout his career. And the fact that he's been in the position to make them is due down to his hard work, basically. So it's really nice to see kind of both sides of that journey. So really, I'm going to just lead you through some courses, thinking about what you might want to do in terms of getting on the ladder of studying for this kind of career area. Now, I should say as a caveat to start with, You don't have to study economics, business management at university if you want to go on and do this kind of work. Stuart himself did mathematics, but there are other degrees that you can do, because as we've heard really from Stuart, so many things can happen to you. And even Jemima, who is at university and has chosen to study this, some things have come her way that have made her make some changes to her plan. So it's always about being completely open-minded. And there are many, many successful business people in the world who did not study business at university, and indeed possibly didn't even go to university. But what I've put together tonight is a handful of different courses that show just a variety of different things that you might want to think about. So the next slide that I've got is a slide that just shows the complete university guides, kind of top 10 list of business and management courses in the UK. So you've got a list there, and this is a very good website for looking at the kind of criteria that we can see across the top there, and you can see the sort of scores and rankings that these universities get. So when you're starting to make your decision about what to study and where to study it, there are so many different things, so many different factors that come into play, and I would definitely not make 100% of your choice based on this kind of information, but it is there for the looking at. And so when you are starting to make those choices, it's worth looking at these things. If we can go on to the next slide, the first course that I thought would be interesting just to talk about for a couple of minutes is UCL, University College London. A lot of our students here at school love going to London for university, and we have a lot of success at London universities. And particularly for a course like this, you can imagine why. Stuart was talking about investment banking being quite London centred. And so things like professional opportunities and connections and networks, London is the ideal place, but of course all of the universities, again, we've heard from Jemima, and she's very far away from London, and the success that she is having there. So there was talk about A-level choices and things like that earlier on. And for this course at UCL, it's a 3-year course. They do require 3 A's, but they have no requirement at all for any particular subject. You might be able to see at the bottom that it says BSc, that's a Bachelor of Science. Without going into too much technical detail, there's a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science. And they're basically your first level of degree, whether it's an arts degree, a humanities degree, or more of a science-based degree. Quite often a BSc course will ask for some kind of science A-level, but this one doesn't. Although they do recommend some preferred A-levels, in particularly social science, so things like history, politics, economics, geography, psychology, those kinds of A-levels. And so whatever courses you are looking at, there are lots of things to look at, but absolutely you must look at the entry requirements and check that you have got the A-levels that are required. At UCL in the International Management course, it is a 3-year course, but one of those 3 years will be a study abroad. You'll have an international placement, and that year abroad will count towards your degree. Some courses have the opportunity to study abroad for a year, and they might be a 4-year course. And if they're a 4-year course, that's often because that year that you are studying abroad counts a little bit towards your degree, typically 10% of the final marks, but not as a whole year. So if you have a 3-year course where there is a 1 year abroad built into that, that means that the study that you do on that year will count in the same way that all the rest of your UK studying counts. So you just need to be aware of that, because there are lots of things around going to study abroad for a year, settling into a different culture, how much you want to go home, how much you find it challenging to just to be away from home, and can you commit 100% to your studies and hit that same level that you were hitting academically. So it's worth thinking about that. But this is a very popular course, and international management is a very, very popular course across all universities. So the next slide that I wanted to show you was, it's a Manchester course, and I like this title, it's really long, Business Accounting with Industrial Professional Experience Flying Start Degree Programme. Fantastic. So this course is actually a 4-year course. The entry requirements for this course are also 3 A's, and they have a very similar set of preferred subjects to the one at UCL. Again, there is no requirement. They do list maths, though, as a preferred subject. So it may be worth considering taking maths if you're choosing A-levels, because they've asked for it as a preferred subject. It doesn't mean you have to have it, but it means there's going to be some mathematical content. And as Jemima was saying, if you don't have that, it might just be a little bit more challenging, but that's not a reason not to do it. The other thing about this course being a 4-year course is they actually do quite a lot of the qualifications, or some of the qualifications, I should say, that lead you towards an accountancy qualification. So you're a qualified chartered accountant. Normally it's 3 years after a normal degree, but for this one it's 2 more years of study. So it means that one of those years is going to be based on preparing you for chartered accountancy, which is a really good qualification to have. You don't have to go into that, but it does give you a bit of a head start. So, and again, as you can see, there's professional experience involved in that, or working in industry. And there are lots of different options for that. And so what they would like you to do is, in your 3rd year would be your placement year. So you go and work in industry, and they will help you find a placement. And typical placements will be with the firms like the big firms, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, KPMG, PwC, etc., etc. You do have to apply for these work placements, and they are competitive. And if you don't get on one of those, you carry on with your degree work at the university. But they do offer the opportunity, and they highly encourage that opportunity. And the first course that I mentioned, and this one, and all of them coming up, do all have, as we've heard, core modules that you need to take, and then optional modules. And that's where you can decide what routes and interests that you might want to follow. And it is dependent year on year on what is available. So they might have general lists of what can be available in optional courses, but they aren't always available every year because the academics are off on research or doing things like that. So you just have to bear that in mind as well. And the other thing to say before moving on to the next course is that both our speakers have mentioned ways of working, ways of learning, and assessment. And increasingly, there's more and more information about all of these courses and all the websites every year, so that people can make really informed decisions, because, as Stuart has said, you are going to be investing a lot of money, and it's money well worth investing, but you need to know what you're investing in. And assessment modes and styles are really, really important. If you're somebody, as Jemima said, that doesn't really like writing lots of essays or doing lots of coursework, you need to think about that. Some of these courses will have a lot of group work, project work, because they're going to emulate what the world of work would be like. So you're relying on other people, and that's a brilliant life skill, but it can be quite challenging as well. Do you want to just do final year exams and just have a bit more of an independent way of working throughout the year? That might be something you want to think about. So you can choose courses alongside all of the other information you'll be looking at, based on assessment modes and ways of working, and modes of working. So that's really something to look at as well. So the next course that I picked out, I had not actually heard of this. Other people may have heard of this. I thought this was really fascinating. So this is Cambridge University, and it's not, again, sorry, the text is quite small. This is a 9-month course that you can apply to get into if you are currently a student at Cambridge University. And it's where, whatever your undergraduate discipline is, it doesn't have to be in business or management or anything related. You can spend your 3rd year doing management studies within, maybe loosely related to the subject you're studying, but you will be learning. It's a skills-based 1-year program that you have to apply to get onto, and then it will be part of your degree. And it's absolutely fascinating, and it's open to any students of doing any discipline. And if you look in the detail of this, it lists what's actually in the program, the skills that you're going to be learning. It's all about leadership skills, management skills, and it's run by the Cambridge Judge faculty, which is their business institute. And as I say, it's competitive to get into, and so you have to submit a full application, and there's a list of what the curriculum things are that you'll be studying. But it's a fascinating course, and I think it's something that's well worth looking at if you are a student at Cambridge University already. So next slide, please. This is just a little bit more detail about that course. I put that in just so that you can see a little bit about what you'll be doing. And one of the things, and the reason I put this slide in, is because one of the things that you have to do is a consulting project. So if you're interested in management consultancy specifically, you will be actually emulating a consultancy project, and you will have to work with your supervisor and a team to complete the project. And you will be working with a real client, and you have to solve a problem for them, which is exactly the sorts of things that Stuart was talking about, having done in his career and still probably doing. So that's just a little bit more detail about that course there. Thank you. So the next course that I pulled out was Leeds University, again, a very popular university. And in fact, Stuart mentioned that quite a lot of industry is based in Leeds. So this is a management consulting master's course, as opposed to an undergraduate course. It's a master's course, so you do need to have an undergraduate degree to apply to this, and you need to have passed your degree to a good level, a 2-1. The very top classification is a first, or a 1-1, a first. And then just below that, I would say, I don't have a statistic for this, but probably the majority of students get a 2-1 from university. It's a really, really high, good standard degree standard. And you need to have that to get onto the management consultancy master's program at Leeds. There are lots of really interesting things about this master's program. They do offer, it's accredited by, or it's run through the the Leeds Business School, and it's accredited by a whole range of professional bodies. And what they do offer is a really interesting, it's called a week-long study tour, and you apply to go on this program, and you then get a week abroad internationally, where you could be working anywhere with a company abroad. And it's really kind of gives you a fascinating insight into management consultancy in a different country, working with a whole different range of people. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect to this course. I think that was really all I wanted to say about that. Again, if you go and look on that, you can see the sort of typical things. You're looking at kind of industry standards, you're looking at project work, you're looking at all of the advanced skills that you would need to be a management consultant, but you don't have to, your undergraduate bachelor's degree can be in anything. It doesn't have to be a business management or related degree. So thank you very much. The next slide. This one is really interesting. I should say, just a bit of a caveat at the start, I was looking at apprenticeship degrees, and Mr. Crumpton mentioned earlier that there are lots and lots of those, and what Stuart did at university was what we might kind of have, it's sort of along those lines, was a sponsored degree. Those were something that I think was a bit of a precursor to the apprenticeship degrees, where essentially a company would sponsor you. As he mentioned, you didn't have to pay for university then, but would perhaps pay your expenses, give you a grant, a maintenance grant to live, and typically offer you a job at the end. And I know that those have been around for a very long time. So this is a kind of different version of that. And PwC offers quite a lot, lots and lots of businesses do, and they do tend to be in the finance, tech kind of sector, management sector. And this one is the PwC's Business Management Degree Apprenticeship. And just some of the very enticing details: they pay all of your fees, and you get a salary of £25,600 per year. You also get a PwC benefits package. It's a 4-year degree. When I drill down a little bit into the detail, sorry, I'm just going to stand up because my light is on a timer, and I know I really tried to turn it off for this, but I couldn't. So let me just wave my arms for a second. Apologies for stepping away for a second there. When I looked into this, and I thought, well, I'll still talk about it, even though it's got quite a few caveats attached to it. This one is actually one where they already want you to be employed by a company, so you don't have to have a degree. It is a degree, you just need your A-levels, and they only require 2 A-levels, but you do need to be employed by a business. But what they will do is tailor your program to your company of work. You will work and you will do the degree part-time, and they will pay, as I said, all of your fees and give you a salary. So it's a very, very enticing opportunity. It also, and this is perhaps what I should have checked before going down the route, but I thought since I'd done a lot of research into it, I wouldn't just abandon it. It's accredited by Ulster University, which is in Northern Ireland, and you do actually have to live in Northern Ireland to be able to do this degree. But that doesn't mean it's a barrier to everybody. It's just worth knowing that you need to be employed and that you do need to live in Northern Ireland. But there are plenty of degree apprenticeships out there, and you can find them all on the UCAS website as well. But it's an interesting development, certainly in the world of apprenticeships, apprenticeship degrees. So next slide, please. So this is the last course that I'm going to be talking about, and this is Sheffield University. So again, another really popular university with our pupils. And this is a Business Management and Modern Languages and Cultures Bachelor of Arts degree. Again, there's no particular A-levels required. The entry requirements are ABB, which is very kind of a very reasonable entry requirement. And again, the degrees are accredited by their, well, run by their business school and their languages and cultures department, and accredited by lots of different business organisations. It's a 4-year degree, as you can see, and your 3rd year is spent abroad because there is a languages element to this course as well. And you can see on that slide a list of the languages that they are offering, which is a really interesting list of languages there. Some of them possibly familiar to you, things you may be aware of, have learned, and others not, and there's no prerequisite for that. It is a dual honours, a joint honours degree. It's run by 2 separate departments, the Languages and Cultures Department and the Business Department. So you'll get a really, really wide array of skills in there. You are looking at the business side of things, but you're also looking at languages and cultures. And of course, if you want to work globally, internationally, or indeed work in the UK, but for international firms, this is a fantastic course to study. So I thought that was just a really nice different course from some of the other ones. So the last slide from me is not a particular course. It's more just kind of tying in. So the next slide is just tying in really with actually very nicely what Jemima said at the start about all of those lovely things that she's doing at university. She's very busy, really getting stuck into things, but also what Stuart said about the pro bono work that he does now, but also the young enterprise that got him into his career in the first place. So I looked at Birmingham University, another very, very popular university with our students, to look at the extracurricular availability in this kind of management area, because what I've said there is really wherever you end up studying, whatever you end up doing, you must definitely get involved and develop your interests in this area. So whether it's having, as Jemima very nicely put, a side hustle, or whether you're at school doing Young Enterprise, which we've heard about already, and it's incredibly popular at our school, Young Enterprise. And there's also Junior Traders, which Ms. Chisnell runs for the younger pupils. We also do some things within careers with our younger years. We're doing a Year 7 Enterprise Day this year, and we do, Year 10 do a kind of a business challenge, Year 8 do a Dragon's Den style challenge. So there are lots of things that we do in school already to feed these kind of skills and interests into our students' curriculum offer. But looking at what's available here just at Birmingham University with a quick search, you can see the things that they offer there. The enterprising scheme, the Student Impact Award, Future Leaders, there's a Birmingham Award for an employability program. You can have a mentor, and we have our Project Pankhurst mentoring scheme here as well, which is a really nice thing to add to your CV, if you like, and thousands of societies, as all universities do. So it's really important to follow your interests and your passions and to get involved in as many things as you can, because if you're interested in business, in management, in finance, in consultancy, it's a very, very multidisciplinary area of study and work. You have to have, as we've heard, academic ability, commitment, dedication, drive, motivation, resilience, some specific skill, potentially mathematical skill or other kinds of skills, depending on the route that you go. But you also have to be an outward-facing person, communication skills, teamwork, flexibility, adaptability, all of those things. So the kinds of things that you get involved in when you're at school from really a very young age, all of those, whether it's sport, drama, music, Young Enterprise is more directly related, but working on the Onward magazine, the leadership roles that you have in school, all of those things can be tailored to and used to help build a profile and a skill set for yourself that will be really, really useful for your future career, and particularly if you want to do something that is in the business management and that area of work. So that's everything from me. So thank you very much for listening to that, and I think these slides will be available so that you can see at your leisure a little bit more some of the courses that have been mentioned there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Norton. As ever, a really capacious and wonderfully informative set of slides there to give so many different insights into what is, as I said at the start of the session this evening, a real growth area for students here at Manchester High. So just really to close things off by saying thank you again to Jemima, thank you to Stuart, who has stayed on the call, and really just to reiterate, if you do want to contact either of those speakers with particular questions, please send an email to development@manchester the usual MHSG email address, or you can do it via Teams to Mrs. Norton or myself. And thank you very much. Thank you, Ellie, as ever, for arranging the event so efficiently. And thank you, everybody who is watching live and anybody who might be watching this recording in the future. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much.